Welcome to this insightful discussion on leveraging emerging technologies for effective counterterrorism and counterinsurgency operations of the Nigerian Army as security challenges evolve. The integration of advanced technologies like drones, artificial intelligence, and surveillance systems has become critical in the fight against terrorism and insurgency. In this video, we will explore the ways emerging technologies are reshaping military operations and how the Nigerian Army can optimize these tools for operational success. But before we dive in, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with your network so others can benefit from these insights. Let's work together to foster meaningful conversations around national security. Now let's begin.
All right, let's jump right in, ready to explore some seriously cutting-edge military tech.
Definitely. It's a fascinating area, and this report on how the Nigerian Army is using it is a great place to start.
Absolutely. The stuff they're doing with robots and AI to combat terrorism and insurgency, it's mind-blowing, like straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, the way warfare is changing is incredible.
So let's go back to the beginning. I was really surprised to see that they were already using drones back in 2013.
Yeah, they started with off-the-shelf models like the DJI and Mavic Pro, mainly for surveillance.
Pretty smart, right? A relatively low-cost way to start experimenting with the tech.
Exactly, like dipping their toes in the water.
And then later they could upgrade to more advanced systems once they knew what they needed, like a test run.
Yeah, exactly, like a test run.
The report also mentioned Pakistan's success with using tech in their counterterrorism efforts.
Right, they made some amazing progress.
They went from like number 2 to number 8 on the Global Terrorism Index.
Yeah, a huge improvement.
Can you remind me what that index actually measures?
It basically ranks countries based on the impact of terrorism. So a lower number means fewer incidents, fatalities, and injuries.
So basically how much terrorism is affecting a country.
Yeah, exactly. And Pakistan really managed to reduce that impact by using things like UAVs, facial recognition, even AI for more targeted operations.
Wow. So their use of tech actually led to real results. Fewer lives lost, less fear and disruption.
Absolutely.
And then there's the example of Mozambique.
Oh, yeah. Mozambique is a great success story.
They were facing a really terrible situation in the northern province of Cabo Delgado.
It was really bad. Thousands of casualties, people being forced from their homes.
Devastating.
It really was, but they managed to turn things around.
By using emerging tech.
Yeah, drones, even some AI-enabled robots, and it led to a significant drop in violence.
So it wasn't just a technological experiment. It actually had a positive impact on the ground.
It did. It really did. And a lot of the people who'd been displaced were actually able to return home.
That's amazing. So these early wins, both in Nigeria and other places, I guess they kind of prove the potential of this tech.
Yeah, and it seems like the Nigerian Army really took those lessons to heart and started investing more strategically in tech.
So they went from those early experiments to actually building a more sophisticated approach.
Exactly. And a big part of that was creating dedicated units to handle these new technologies.
Like in 2015 when they set up the 50 Space Command.
Yep. That's the
50 Space Command. It sounds so futuristic.
Right. It does have a certain ring to it.
Like something out of Star Wars.
It really does.
But it shows how seriously they were taking this, right? Unmanned systems were becoming a big part of their strategy.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just a name. They were actually putting resources and personnel into it.
And then later on, they replaced the 50 Space Command with the NAUAV Command.
The Nigerian Army UAV Command, yep.
So even more specialization, even more focus on drones.
Exactly. And by this point, they're moving beyond those basic off-the-shelf drones. They're acquiring things like the Aerosonde.
Okay, so what's special about the Aerosonde?
Well, for one, it's got a 12-hour endurance, which means it can stay in the air for a really long time.
So all-night surveillance without needing to land?
Exactly.
That's impressive. But it wasn't just about getting better drones, was it?
No, they also realized they needed a more centralized approach to how they were using them.
So instead of each unit doing their own thing, it was more coordinated.
Exactly. So in 2022, they implemented a policy to centralize command of all their unmanned aircraft systems.
Makes sense. That way you can avoid duplication and make sure everything's being used effectively.
Right. And that led to the creation of NASCI, the Nigerian Army Space Command.
So this centralized command structure paved the way for an even bigger step, didn't it?
It did. They were able to acquire the Turkish Bayraktar TB2.
The Bayraktar, I've heard of this. Isn't it one of those armed drones?
You got it. It can carry out precision strikes.
Wow, that's a whole other level of capability.
It is. It means they can engage in offensive operations using drones, which is a big shift for them.
So from those early surveillance drones to something that can actually deliver firepower, pretty significant.
Yeah, and they're not stopping there.
I was reading about this bomb-sniffing robot they're developing, Curio.
Yeah, that's a fascinating project.
Can you tell me more about it?
Well, it's basically a robot on tracks. It's radio-controlled and designed to handle really dangerous tasks.
So things like bomb disposal?
Exactly. Also, reconnaissance, maybe even using light firearms in the future.
Robots on the front lines? That's kind of terrifying, but also super cool.
Right. It's straight out of science fiction.
So they're not just using drones in the air, they're also putting robots on the ground.
Yep, and the idea is that these robots can keep human soldiers out of harm's way.
Makes sense, especially for things like clearing IEDs. Let the robots do the dangerous work.
Absolutely. And robots are more systematic. They can use sensors to scan areas thoroughly, might even pick up on things humans would miss.
So drones in the air, robots on the ground, and they're even using space tech, right?
That's right. They've started using Starlink satellite internet.
I've heard of Starlink, but I didn't realize it was being used in military operations.
It's proving to be really valuable, especially in remote areas where it's hard to get reliable communication.
Yeah, makes sense, instead of relying on patchy radio signals.
Exactly.
So what kind of things can they do with Starlink?
Well, imagine being able to live stream video from a patrol deep in the jungle. That's the kind of capability Starlink brings.
Wow, that's incredible. It would be a game changer for situational awareness.
Absolutely. And it's not just Starlink. They're also phasing out those expensive Thuraya satellite phones.
Yeah, those things cost a fortune, right?
They do. So they're replacing them with SAT-100 PTT satellite radios, which are more affordable and versatile.
So they can stay connected, share information in real time.
Yep, better command and control, more efficient operations.
So we've got drones, robots, space-age internet, and I can't forget about AI.
AI is a huge part of this as well.
So where does AI fit into all of this?
Well, it's playing a role in everything from analyzing intelligence to countering propaganda.
Okay, so let's talk about that, the propaganda part, because it's not something we usually think of as part of warfare.
But it's becoming increasingly important, especially with the spread of misinformation and disinformation online.
It's like a whole other battleground, the digital space.
It is, and the Nigerian Army is taking it very seriously.
So how are they using AI to fight back in this digital war?
Well, for one, they set up the NA Cyber Warfare Command back in 2018.
In ACWC, right?
Yep, that's the one.
And then they deployed the NA Command and Control Center in 2021, which is AI-enabled. Okay, so what does this AI system actually do?
It can analyze massive amounts of data from online sources, social media, news websites, all that stuff, looking for potentially harmful content that's being spread about the Nigerian Army.
So it's like having an army of analysts constantly monitoring the web.
It is, except it's much faster and more efficient than humans could ever be.
But it's not just about detecting these narratives, is it? Can the AI actually do something about them?
Well, right now, it mainly flags them for human responders who can then take appropriate action.
Okay, so it's still a human-in-the-loop system.
Right, but they're working on making it more autonomous.
So the AI could eventually counter propaganda on its own.
That's the goal, but it raises a whole bunch of ethical questions.
Yeah, I can imagine. But we can talk about those later, because right now I want to shift gears and talk about some of the challenges the Nigerian Army is facing in all of this, because it can't all be smooth sailing, right?
Definitely not. There are definitely some hurdles they have to overcome. It's exciting stuff, right? All these advancements.
It is. But I imagine it's not as easy as just buying a bunch of shiny new gadgets and sending them out into the field.
You're right. Integrating this kind of tech into a military structure, it's complicated.
Yeah, it's not like a video game where you just click and deploy a robot army.
Not quite. The report actually highlighted a few key challenges.
Okay, so what are some of the hurdles they're facing?
Well, one of the biggest is coordination, or the lack thereof.
What do you mean?
Well, it seems like different branches of the military are sometimes working on similar projects without even realizing it.
So they're duplicating efforts, wasting resources.
Exactly. It's inefficient.
Like reinventing the wheel.
Exactly.
So the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing.
Basically, and that's why the report really stresses the need for a more unified approach, bringing everyone together, even collaborating with civilian institutions.
So more sharing of knowledge, resources, expertise.
Exactly. It's about creating a kind of tech ecosystem.
Where everyone benefits from each other's work.
Exactly. And that leads to faster innovation, better results.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But even with better coordination, they still have another big challenge, right? Nigeria's technological base.
That's a big one. They simply don't have the capacity to produce a lot of this tech domestically.
So they have to rely on foreign suppliers.
They do, which makes them vulnerable.
What do you mean?
Well, what happens if those supply chains get disrupted? Or if sanctions are imposed?
Oh, right, they'd be stuck.
Exactly. The report actually uses the example of an indigenous helicopter project.
They were trying to build their own helicopters.
They were, but they hit a snag.
What happened?
They couldn't source the necessary AI components locally.
So the project stalled.
It did, which highlights the need to boost domestic production.
So how do they do that?
Well, there are a few options: partnerships with other countries, technology transfer agreements, investing heavily in their own research and development.
It's like needing to learn how to bake your own bread instead of relying on the bakery down the street.
I like that analogy. It's about becoming self-sufficient, controlling your own destiny.
Exactly. But even if they figure out the production side of things, there's still another piece of the puzzle missing, right?
You're right, the people.
Or the lack of people.
Yeah, the report highlighted a serious shortage of skilled personnel.
In what areas?
All the key areas: AI, robotics, cybersecurity, you name it.
It's like having all the ingredients for a gourmet meal, but no chef to cook it.
Exactly. What good is all this technology if you don't have the people who know how to use it?
So what's the solution?
Training, education, capacity building. It's all about investing in people.
So they need to create a whole new generation of tech-savvy soldiers.
Basically, and the report actually had a pretty shocking statistic.
What was that?
The research and development centers in the Nigerian Army are only staffed at 19.5% on average.
So they're missing over 80% of the personnel they need.
Yeah, it's a massive gap.
So how do you even begin to tackle a problem that big?
Well, it's about taking a multi-pronged approach. Targeted training programs, collaborations with international experts, investing in simulators to give people hands-on experience.
It's like boot camp for the digital age.
Exactly. Instead of learning to dismantle a rifle, they're learning to code an algorithm.
Or troubleshoot a drone malfunction.
Exactly. It's a whole new set of skills.
But it's not just about technical skills, is it?
No, it's also about critical thinking, adaptability, being able to make decisions in the field when things don't go according to plan.
Because technology can fail, right?
It can, and you can't always rely on a manual or wait for instructions from headquarters.
So they need soldiers who can think on their feet, improvise, adapt to new situations.
Absolutely. A technology is a tool. It's only as good as the person using it.
Okay, I'm getting a bit overwhelmed here. Coordination problems, production bottlenecks, a massive skills shortage. It sounds like an uphill battle.
It's definitely a challenge, but it's not insurmountable.
So you're saying there's hope?
There is, because challenges are also opportunities.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these opportunities.
Well, remember that problem of relying on foreign suppliers? They're starting to explore things like production licensing agreements and reverse engineering techniques.
Production licensing, reverse engineering, what are those?
Well, production licensing basically means they get permission to produce certain technologies locally, using blueprints from the original designers.
So instead of importing drones, they could build them in Nigeria.
Exactly. And reverse engineering is about taking apart a piece of existing technology to figure out how it works.
So they can learn from it and maybe even improve on it?
Exactly. It's a way to become less reliant on others, to develop their own expertise.
That's pretty clever.
It is. It shows that they're thinking long-term, strategically.
And what about the people? Are they making any progress on closing that skills gap?
They are. They're investing in training programs, focusing on those key areas like AI, drones, cybersecurity.
So they're building that tech-savvy workforce.
They are, but it's a long-term process.
Technology's always evolving. How do you keep up?
It's about creating a culture of continuous learning within the military, encouraging people to stay curious, to keep developing their skills.
So it's not just about one-off training courses. It's about a mindset shift.
Exactly, a commitment to lifelong learning.
That's a big change for a traditional institution like the military.
It is, but it's essential in this day and age. The world is changing too fast to stand still.
So they're basically playing catch-up while also trying to run a marathon.
In a way, yes, but they're showing a lot of determination, a willingness to adapt.
And that's what matters in the end, right?
It does. It shows that they're serious about embracing these new technologies, about using them effectively and responsibly.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, the opportunities, but there's one more thing we need to address.
The implications, right?
Exactly, because all this cool tech, it has consequences.
It does, both positive and negative, and we need to talk about those.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, talking about all the cool tech the Nigerian Army is using.
Drones, robots, AI, it's a pretty impressive list.
It is. But Like you said, we need to talk about the implications of all this, the potential downsides.
Right, because technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used in ways that are harmful.
So where do we even begin to unpack all of that? What are some of the key concerns?
Well, one of the biggest ones is unintended consequences.
What do you mean?
Well, let's take drones, for example. They're being used for surveillance and targeted strikes.
Right, and we talked about how effective they can be.
But what happens if a drone misidentifies a target? Or if there's collateral damage?
Oh, right, mistakes can happen, even with advanced technology.
Exactly, and the consequences can be devastating.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about how it's used.
And who's accountable when something goes wrong?
Right, because it's not always clear, is it? Is it the operator, the manufacturer, the military leadership?
It's a complex issue, and there are no easy answers.
And it's not just about drones, is it? What about AI? We were talking about how the Nigerian Army is using it to analyze information online.
Right, to counter negative narratives.
But couldn't that lead to censorship? Or the suppression of legitimate criticism?
It's definitely a risk, especially if the AI system is trained on biased data.
So we have to be really careful about how we design and implement these systems.
Absolutely, and we need safeguards in place to prevent misuse.
Because at the end of the day, it's about human judgment, right?
It is. Technology can't make those decisions for us.
We have to be the ones to decide what's right and wrong, how these tools should be used.
And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to talk about the ethical implications of this technology.
So we need to involve everyone. Policymakers, military leaders, tech experts, even the public.
Exactly. It's a shared responsibility.
Because the decisions we make today about this technology will have a huge impact on the future.
Absolutely. It's something we need to be thinking about very carefully.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. We've covered a lot of ground today, explored some really fascinating and complex issues.
We have. It's been a great discussion.
We talked about the incredible potential of these new technologies, but also the challenges and the risks.
And the importance of using them responsibly, ethically.
It's a lot to think about.
It is, but it's important that we do think about it, that we stay informed and engaged.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
I hope so, too. It's been a pleasure.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and let's continue to learn and grow together.
Thank you for watching. If you found this discussion on leveraging emerging technologies for counterterrorism and counterinsurgency operations insightful, subscribe to the channel to stay updated on future episodes. Don't forget to like this video and share it widely together. We can drive meaningful conversations about security and technology. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments section. We want to hear what you think and get your suggestions on the next topic or book we should discuss. Stay tuned and stay informed.